Let's move on to the title race. I watched the Bremen Leverkusen game, and I was extremely shocked by how disengaged this Leverkusen team was at times from this match. Both times when they took the lead, they took the foot off the pedal completely, and then Bremen scored and made it 1-1, and Leverkusen were like, oh yeah, we have to do something here, made it 2-1. And then Bremen scored a second, Romano Schmid, a nice goal, by the way, but I do think Radetzky could have done better there. But, we can talk about Radetzky. We've talked about Radetzky a lot, the goalkeeper of Leverkusen all season, and his return to his means. And that's a debate, I think, a goalkeeper debate. That's not just a case in Leverkusen. But I think, what really worries me about Leverkusen here, and I think we need to talk about what is the true title race here in a moment when we get to Bayern and then Leipzig, Stefan. But it just seems so disengaged at the times. This would have been a game where last year they would have maybe pulled out a third, maybe won that game. But, the one thing that I thought was so interesting, it's they sleepwalked to this 2-2 draw. This is a team that, in my opinion, is looking a little bit bored at the moment and haven't quite realized yet that they probably need to win a few more games if they really want to defend that Bundesliga title.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't get a chance to watch this game, but I was quite struck by the echoes, quite similar really to the Frankfurt game in the sense that they only really woke up when Frankfurt scored. And yeah, like Leverkusen just look exhausted. They look tired. They look like a team who are over-reliant maybe on Florian Wirtz and Victor Boniface to kind of score the goals and create the goals by equal measure, really. And I think also just maybe other teams have just started to figure Leverkusen out, really. In a sense, Werder Bremen are a decent team. They do create chances. But, Leverkusen more or less had to rely on an own goal here to kind of take away a point from this game, which doesn't exactly scream of title challengers by any means. And I think it's a huge problem for Leverkusen. I think they're probably going to really struggle with the extra kind of game time. But equally, we talked about this as well quite a few times. Whether it's the Hideki thing or guys like Grimaldo and Florian and Jerry Frimpong kind of stepping off, or Jonathan Tah, Tabsoba maybe stepping down. If everyone kind of takes even like 5 or 10% off their game performances that they showed last season, it's obviously going to kind of start to show the cracks in this Leverkusen team because they more or less overperformed so much last season. It only makes sense that they would eventually come back down to earth. But my biggest concern, I think, for Leverkusen is just simply that if you kind of look at who's scored and creating the chances, it's Victor Boniface right now on 9 goals and assists. You got Florian Wirtz on 8. And then after that, you then have to go down to both fullbacks in Grimaldo and Frimpong. And there's no one else in that team. There's no Jonathan Hoffman, there's no Patrick Schick, there's no Martin Terrier, there's no Nathan Teller, there's no Adley, there's no one else really in that forward lineup that's doing well performance-wise or consistency-wise. And, if you can find a way to kind of frustrate Wirtz or keep Victor Boniface out of the game, then you've got a good chance against Leverkusen this season.
Yeah, and I think too is like what just strikes me is that this lack of sense of urgency. It's almost like they believe a little bit too much in themselves. Whenever they do take the lead, they're like, "Oh yeah, job is done," And then that was one of the comments I put in the Substack chat when they were up 1-0. I'm like, Leverkusen are sleepwalking to a draw here, right? It's just you mentioned it. If everyone steps off 3 or 4%, but it's at times it's just like they make the game so slow. They're so reluctant to really press and. Give credit to Victor Boniface to score the goal here in days after that awful car accident that he was involved in, right? To still come up with this sort of performance. But Javi Alonso is on the sidelines here ripping his hair out. And it's almost like it's almost like these guys are believing a little bit too much in themselves. This is the sense that I get a little bit from Leverkusen at the moment, and I think you make a really excellent point about the lack of secondary scoring here, right? Like last year, what they had is that players would come off the bench and they would provide extra goals, and I mean that's something that maybe hasn't quite worked out this year. Is that the additions that were brought in are just not providing it in the same way than a lot of these players that they had coming off the bench. Even someone like Klosek, right? Like we would provide a little bit of extra thing, and he's now playing at Hoffenheim. I mean, I understand why someone like Klosek would want to move on for more playing time because he wasn't getting it there. But it's just, I'd be extremely frustrating if I was Leverkusen at the moment, because it isn't like Bayern Munich are dominating this league. There's no reason why Leverkusen should be 5 points behind them at this stage of the Bundesliga season, because it's not like, yeah, they smashed Bochum today, and we'll get to that in a moment. But this Bayern side is very much up there for the taking, and I think what's evidence about that is that in Leipzig there's a team that didn't have the best start either, but they're still sitting there at top on even points with Bayern Munich and slowly gaining their form. So I think that is the frustrating thing for any of these teams that are sitting behind Bayern Munich at the moment. That okay, Bayern Munich are first, but they really shouldn't be. I think that is what I think what a lot of people at Leverkusen would find frustrating at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, probably, if you wanted to kind of draw a comparison to all these kind of teams that are in and around it, like Dortmund, Leipzig, and Leverkusen, if we want to kind of move on to the Leipzig game in particular. I think the thing that really stands out between Leipzig and the other two is that Marco Rosa has, at the very least, sorted out that defence. Leipzig's defence is outstanding. They've got, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they've still got the best record in terms of goals conceded so far this season. In terms of XG against, they've got one of the best as well. And obviously Rosa's kind of decided that, like, well, maybe our attacking line is going to be rather straightforward, and perhaps a little too over-reliant on Xavi Simons at times. If we can just continue making sure we don't ship goals, then we can obviously then just kind of work from there and pick up points. And maybe he's just kind of maybe that was the conclusion he took away from Leverkusen's success last season. Everyone, obviously the poster boys of that Leverkusen team were Florian Wirtz and Boniface and, Frimpong and Grimaldo kind of rushing into the box. But what they did better than just about any other team in the league last year was their defensive record. They were strong defensively. They didn't concede goals. They made sure they didn't lose games. And then after they did that, they then started working on scoring goals and creating chances. And I think that's what Leipzig have kind of taken from that, and that's what they've done better than just about anyone else in the league this year. You can even include Bayern Munich in that, who obviously have their issues. And despite winning confidently against Bochum on Sunday, certainly still had their chances. Kim had to basically clear a shot off the line or a goal off the line when it was still 0-0, and Bochum had a handful of chances to do something in that game. And, that's kind of how you do build up momentum to challenge for a title. It's that kind of old sports cliche which I think actually originates in American football, but it's like, attack wins games, but defense wins titles. And fair play to Leipzig, they've been doing that. And the interesting thing is that they do have the attacking talent. It just hasn't really clicked yet. It clicked this weekend, and you saw someone like Antonio Nusa kind of step up after maybe going a little quiet for a couple of weeks. And boy, did Leipzig need it, because obviously Xavi Simons is out injured for a number of weeks. But you were at the club last week, so and you watched this game more than I did. So maybe let you kind of jump in and talk about Leipzig and how they managed to work without Xavi Simons. But I guess the key thing is that they have that bedrock of defensive stability, which means they can then work on other issues because they don't have to worry about losing control of the game in the first place.
Yeah, I know. Just 3 goals conceded in 8 games, which is incredible, right? The next best team is actually Union Berlin. We're sitting in 4th, quietly sitting in 4th. It seems like they have erased whatever happened last year, and they're doing it also based on a really strong defense. But Leipzig's defense has been incredibly outstanding, and I was at the Liverpool game, and I actually thought that the reason they lost that game to Liverpool wasn't defense. Yes, they made that one mistake and that's enough. But ultimately, there was more than enough there for Leipzig to score 2 goals and then they would have won the game, right? Like conceding once against Liverpool is no shame. They're one of the best teams in the Premier League. I think still the best team. I'm not sure what the result was against Arsenal. But
They drew 2-2.
they drew 2-2. So okay, no longer first. Man City took that spot now, right? But you get my point. They're one of the best teams in the Premier League, and they were pretty much even. The reason they didn't win that game was because they couldn't figure out the scoring. And to be quite honest with you, I actually thought, and this is maybe a bit of a controversial take, the reason why they were much better in the attack against Freiburg is probably because Javi Simmons wasn't in the squad. He's out injured. He's going to be out for a while. And I this might sound like a very contrarian opinion or hot take or whatever, but I think this Leipzig team in the short term, I think long term, Javi Simmons is going to be incredibly important for this club. Don't get me wrong, but the way Javi Simmons has played lately, he's hindering that attack rather than helping it. And I think against Freiburg, we actually saw why. I thought that Javi Simmons cut a incredibly frustrating figure against Liverpool. And that was not the first time. It just, see it live makes it even more apparent. The beautiful thing about the stadium in Leipzig is that the press box is like almost underneath the roof. So you get to see the entire field, which is why I think watching games live is so much more enlightening at times, right? Because you see the problems developing much better than you do in front of television, where we only get to see the segments. And you could really see that right now, in his current form, Javi Simmons' decision making is holding this team back. There were so many times where he could have squared off the ball and he would decide to go 1v1. There were so many times where he went 1v1 but squared off the ball and like maybe passed the ball behind Šeško's back or Penda's back, And all of that was gone in the Freiburg game. It was more direct. It was more forward. It was that the attack played much faster. I thought that the whole setup with Baumgartner just helped them a little bit better. This is the kind of Baumgartner really kind of didn't have the best season last year, but he really stepped up this year, and they're starting to step up this year. And I think that this role is maybe just a tiny bit better for him, and he's maybe a little bit more of a better fit to the faster Šeško and Openda in front of him, because rather than holding onto the ball and slowing down the game, he plays the ball a bit quicker forward. And that's how, Leipzig ended up scoring those 3 goals against a very good Freiburg team, by the way. I think Freiburg played excellent, and the 3-1 is maybe at the end of the day a little bit much, but, Leipzig finally took their chances, and I think that was a really big thing for them in this game. And yeah, I think, fundamentally in the short term, if they can do what they did against Freiburg, I think the results are going to keep coming. And with this defense, and this is what that's fundamentally what really makes Marco Rose maybe the coach that could make the difference here is he's finally also kept a big part of the core together that he had last year, right? So everyone understands a little bit better of what they need to do and their position in the team as well. So I feel like there's something happening there, and there's momentum building, and it's the small little things that they're doing right? It's like, they're getting a 1-0 win here, they're getting a 0-0 draw where they could have maybe lost the game because the defense was strong, and Gulassi comes off, but they have a really good, they have one of the most talented goalkeepers in Belgium, who, by the way, they paid 10 million euros for Van der Voort, right? I mean, he is the future number 1 of this club, and he comes in and it doesn't drop off. And I think I look at this Leipzig team, and I look at the way they're playing, and I can also see them, facing Bayern Munich and probably taking points of them as well, because, unlike Bayern Munich, they actually know how to defend, and I think they're going to be a real problem this year for everyone in this league. And, no one really has them on their radar yet. That might change if this keeps going, and they're going to be all of a sudden maybe 3 points ahead of Bayern Munich, or even with Bayern Munich. But I think this RB Leipzig team could be the Leverkusen of last year.
Yeah, I think Christoph Baumgartner point's a spot on one. He more than anyone's really kind of suffered from the club deciding to re-sign Xavi Simons this summer. More or less has had to play second fiddle to him. This is the first time he's really been able to start, I think, this season in that kind of number 10 position, and he looked outstanding. You know, he had 2 key passes. He dribbled more than any other player, I think, in the Leipzig team. And if you kind of go all the way back through his time at Hoffenheim, he was a player who scored and created chances, but he was a playmaker first and foremost, especially at youth level. His assist stats in the Hoffenheim's under-19s, under-22s, I think it was, pretty outstanding. Like in 29 games for under-19s, he's got 9 goals and 15 assists. So, you know, he's a player who knows how to set up chances. And you're right, it'll be really interesting to see if he finally gets a shot, and then, you know, Marco Rosa's got this he's got this fantastic situation where when Xavi Simons comes back, he says you're going to have to play your way back into this team because Baumgartner's been outstanding. So that's best case scenario for a head coach. And as you said, that could be exactly the kind of performance and momentum that you're looking for from Leipzig to show that they can challenge for the title. And it's up to them now to prove that they can. It's up to them to prove that they're not just picking up points because no one else is, but that they're actually willing to take on that kind of initiative to go head-to-head with Bayern, who I must admit we haven't even had a chance to talk about yet. We actually have to wrap up soon, so maybe we should spend the last 5 minutes perhaps talking about that part. Maybe there's not a huge amount to say because it was just a routine win over Bochum, but it's the very least that Bayern fans, I guess, would be expecting. And it keeps them top of the table, doesn't it?
It keeps them on the top of the table. You know, I think there was a moment where Bayern Munich wanted to make it interesting for everyone else. Manuel Neuer, I don't know, got what he was doing there, and Kim and the defense in general just doing Bayern things. But let's be honest here, this Bochum side, I don't know. It's, you know, they would have probably been best served to just get relegated last year, Stefan. Maybe not to overturn that 3-0 defeat to Fortuna Düsseldorf in that second leg. I think that was a disservice for them. They have absolutely no business being in this league. That sounds harsh, but I believe it's to be true. So yeah, Bayern Munich get their 5-0 win after this atrocious result in Barcelona. I think it's going to maybe alleviate some of the issues, because I think Kompany probably had already his call to the Tegernsee. It will alleviate a few things here, but let's be honest. Is this going to be a benchmark for Bayern Munich? It's their visit to their friendly rivals, right? Like the fan friendship that those two teams have, and it feels like it was a gifted 3 points. I'm not saying Bochum gifted them 3 points on purpose, but because they're so atrociously bad, it was like almost like a scheduled loss for Bochum and a scheduled win for Bayern Munich, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, this weekend's kind of saved Vincent Kompany's bacon, I think, in two sets. As you said, Bochum kind of laid over and happily gave Bayern the 3 points, which is also why they've not decided to sign a new head coach yet, because they knew they were playing Bayern and it was a lose-lose from no matter what. And it really felt like Bayern used this game almost like a training session. You know, we saw Coman, Sané, Musiala kind of pinging balls in. Michael Olise, a tremendous goal. You know, it felt like Bayern just used this game to kind of get all that kind of frustration out of their system. And equally, we then saw Barcelona then go and thump Real Madrid, which maybe takes the pressure off Bayern from losing that game so comprehensively. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Bayern, we saw this at the start of the season. We saw them, you know, absolutely thump Ulm, then they beat Wolfsburg, then they beat Freiburg, then they thumped Kiel, then they thumped Dinamo Zagreb, then they thumped Bremen, and everyone's like, wow, Vincent Kompany is bringing back the Pep Guardiola years at Bayern. And then, you know, we said, well, let's wait and see what happens when they come up against good teams. And we've seen that kind of fall apart. I mean, they beat Stuttgart, admittedly, a very tired Stuttgart team, I would say. But besides that, you know, lost to Villa and Barcelona in the Champions League, drew with Frankfurt and Leverkusen. So there's a lot to do. And I think Bayern fans will happily accept this result. They'll happily accept some tremendous goals. But they'll probably be looking ahead and thinking, okay, we've got an away game in Mainz, which should be a pretty straightforward win. Then we're at home to Union Berlin. Then we're at home to Benfica in the Champions League. And I think those two games will maybe be better tests for them before St. Pauli, Augsburg, and then PSG, and then after that Dortmund. So we're seeing maybe a more kind of the fixture list maybe set up this false sense of security for Bayern, in the sense that they had 5 very easy games, then 4 very difficult games. Whereas now going forward, it looks like it's going to be more 2 on, 2 off in terms of the difficulty. And that's where we need to see Bayern really put together proper, solid, consistent performances. There's no point beating Bochum 5-0 if you're going to drop points to Union Berlin at home or Benfica at home and stuff like that. And there's no point thumping St. Pauli and Augsburg if you then can't get results against PSG and Dortmund. So, Bayern and company live on. But as you said, as we've been saying, this result doesn't really make up for the defeat to Barcelona. And it won't mean anything if they can't figure out a way to perform in these big games going forward.
Yeah, the Union Berlin one, I think, is going to be a real test next weekend. Union held Leipzig, right? Looked really good today against Frankfurt. They should have probably won that game, actually. As I said, they only have conceded 5 goals this year. The second best defensive record after Leipzig. So I think that's going to be a real test because I think they're not going to give Bayern many opportunities. And we all know Bayern's defense loves to give tons of opportunities to the opponent. So I think that's going to be a fascinating match. But as you said, we're pretty much out of time. So let's wrap this up.